show. Folks, joining me now from Ukraine, please welcome CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
In the UN yesterday, the United States and Russia were at loggerheads. The U.S. says the Ukraine is in urgent and dangerous situation, in danger of Russia invading. The Russians say that the United States is exaggerating. You've talked to the Ukrainians. How are they feeling about all this?
It's really extraordinary because you would expect there to be an all-out panic, right? Any other country, there's 120,000 troops on your border. There's a buildup of military hardware. You've got Russian ships also down in the south. You'd think that people would be really freaked out. But what's interesting in Ukraine is that people have been living with the threat of Russian aggression for 8 years. And they lived through a couple of years of pretty vicious fighting between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists. So war has kind of become part of the fabric of life here. And as a result, I think that until there are actually bombs falling or shots being fired, people don't pay as much attention to the rhetoric coming from either side. So like the thing that people would tell me a lot is we don't listen to politics. We don't worry about politics. Until things actually start happening, this is all in the realm of politics for them. And Ukrainian leaders are really trying also to keep people calm. And that's why you've seen them coming out and really for the first time that I've seen disagreeing with America and saying, we don't think an all-out invasion is possible. We want everybody to stay calm.
As I was saying before, that the crisis is a self-generated one by Russia. What does he need to actuate this into an invasion? He's got the troops there. What needs to happen for him to justify the action that's most feared? The tanks.
So I think the most likely scenario that, this is what sort of U.S. intelligence officials have been talking about, is that he would stage some kind of a false flag operation, by which I mean in this sort of pro-Russian separatist area, where, by the way, they have been handing out Russian passports like candy for the last years. He would say, oh, there's been an attack from Ukrainian forces on Donbass, this separatist region. These are Russian citizens. We must go in to protect them, right? And that gives him the sort of fig leaf or pretext of saying, I have an obligation. These people have Russian passports. They're Russian citizens. We need to offer them defenses. And then before you know it, you've got Russian tanks rolling across that border into territory that, it may be under the control of pro-Russian separatists, but this is still part of Ukraine, which is a sovereign country, and it still would constitute, a really big deal, even though it's not an all-out invasion.
Do the Ukrainians have the same sort of national identity that Americans do? Because we really think of ourselves as Americans first, no matter what our ethnicity is, and that we don't want people coming into our country without permission. Like, we have a wall. They need a wall. Would they like a wall? Because we've got a long one that we're not going to use on the southern border.
There's plenty who would like a wall. I would say, Ukrainians definitely have a strong sense of national identity, but it shifts a little bit as you move throughout the country. When you go to the far west of the country, bordering Poland, you see much more Ukrainians who really want to engage with the European Union and with the West and with NATO. When you move to the further parts of the East, you see a lot of people where Russian is their first language. They have family in Russia. We interviewed a Ukrainian soldier on the front lines today. He is a Ukrainian soldier fighting for his country, but he did not want to give his name on camera because his family is in Donbass, in that separatist region. And I think what that I hope helps people understand a little bit is that this is complex, this is nuance. Russia and Ukraine, especially along those border areas, have a long history. They're intermingled in terms of families, in terms of the language, in terms of the history, in terms of the culture. And so it's not a clear-cut issue of just, Ukrainians hate Russia and Russia is the enemy. For many Ukrainians, of course, Russia is the enemy. But for many others, they are also very enmeshed in Russian life.
I'm old enough to remember that the Soviet Union would commonly try to test new presidents of the United States. by creating a crisis, foreign policy crisis, early in that president's term to see what kind of man they were dealing with. Could this be part of it, too, rattling the American cage to see what the response would be from a new administration?
I think that President Putin is always trying to push buttons like that, and especially with each president, trying to get a sense of who they are and what they stand for. And I think maybe, and it's all just speculation, President Putin sees President Biden and he sees how much Biden and his administration have been talking about China, right? We want to focus on China. This is the big challenge. This is the big threat. This is the big competitor. And so perhaps he's trying to take advantage of that moment and both kind of reestablish himself as being a major player of, major international consequence on the world stage, but also hopefully try to take advantage of the fact that maybe President Biden doesn't want to be as focused on Russia, that he would prefer to have, China be the number one thing on his agenda. But with all of these things, Stephen, and, I don't know if you found this, but like at the end of the day, you always end up coming back to the same thing, which is like, what is President Vladimir Putin thinking right now?
Yeah, why is this so important to him?
One man.
Why is Ukraine so important to him?
Well, if you've had the luxury of reading, he wrote a letter about this last summer. It's exceptionally long and exceptionally detailed. It's like a historical tome. He views Ukraine and Russia as being sort of spiritually and religiously and linguistically and historically and culturally kind of one and the same, bonded together. And, when he talks about the collapse of the Soviet Union and he describes it as like, one of the greatest catastrophes, he's talking in no small part about Ukraine and that deep, deep relationship that he believes exists there. So when he sees Ukrainians turning towards the West and ousting the president who was here before, Viktor Yanukovych, who was like the Kremlin's man, and having a revolution and wanting to be part of NATO, that's anathema to everything that he stands for. And it feeds into this idea, which is a sort of a mantra of his, which is NATO encirclement. The West is trying to castrate Russia, to weaken Russia, to encircle us and put their weapons there and their forces there. And that's something that he really will go to great, great lengths to prevent.
Well, Clarissa, thank you so much for giving us the perspective right there in Ukraine. CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward, everybody. We'll be right back with Faith Hill.